Hello and welcome back to another episode of Diablo to D&D. My name is David, and today we're going to go over what goes into making an ability. Before then, however, let's do a campaign update. So, last week, they had just finished Radament's Lair, and not much else was happening that week, so they went out and killed some lightning scarab people, things, I can't remember what they're called, and they got some gold for that. But this past week, they started on the Horadric Staff. They got sent out to the Halls of the Dead to track down the Horadric Cube. And they did a pretty decent job. It was just 3 levels of basically the same floor plan, because that's what they had in the book, is just here's one singular floor plan. But what I did is I switched up where, which dead end they're coming from and which dead end was the exit, and threw in a couple of traps and whatnot to make it a little more interesting, give it some more flavor. But they managed to make their way through and defeat the boss, and it made me very sad because the boss was Blood Witch of the Wild, I think, and she is cursed and extra strong, and didn't even manage to land a hit. And the Necromancer once again used dim vision, and the boss got taken out by a critical hit with Sharpshooter. Anyway, I'm happy for them, but man, was it disappointing, because the Paladin was on the front lines and would have gone down. But whatever. But this did give me an opportunity to create a couple of stat blocks for some monsters. The Saber Cats, they either have a whip or some javelins, and they have a singular potion that they can throw and deal, I think it was 2d6 fire damage on an all or nothing dexterity save, or 2d4 poison damage, or half as much on a successful constitution save. It just gives you a bit more variability. Oh, and they're also either cold or fire resistant. And this layer was, or this tomb, I should say, was just kind of their their home as they went out to go raid caravans and whatnot. So not exactly the way that Diablo 2 does it, but hey, it's a little more flavor, and it's a little more hopefully makes it stand out a little bit more. But I also got the, what is it called? The Bat Demons, which are animals, not demons, but whatever. But because they're attacking with lightning, it's classified as a melee spell attack, so your golem is not going to trigger its slow effect. But we had a ton of fun doing this, and I'm glad that they've enjoyed it. All right, let's move on to the changelog. Bunch of changes this week, because the Necromancer has been using curses very, very well. All curses now allow creatures to make a saving throw at the end of each of their turns. This way, it's pushing it more towards I have to keep the curse going. So it's a way to chew up action economy for the Necromancer. Rather than putting damage down range, they have to actually spend some time using their curses, because curses were ridiculously overpowered, having them at will. So instead of saying that, you can only use this X number of times per long rest, I just made it so that they get to save at the end of each of their turns, and that way it's you can remain unlimited, and it chews up the Necromancer's action economy. Barbarian jumps calculations have been modified, and jumping provokes opportunity attacks. You also must make an optional check when clearing an obstacle. So previously, jump was this massive block of text that was, you use this calculation when doing a high jump, or this calculation when doing a long jump, and here's the benefits, and it was a mess. So what I realized this week is I just say you double your strength and your strength score and strength modifier when determining the distance you can jump. It makes it a whole lot easier to figure out. And I also threw in the ability to you can jump 2 feet for every 1 foot of movement you expend. So if you want to jump 10 feet, that only takes 5 feet of movement, for example. It's just way, way cleaner. The Barbarian also gets increased speed, allowing you to dash as a bonus action. I just pulled the trigger on that one and let it go. Barbarian Concentrate has been changed to a bonus action and grants additional benefits. So Concentrate has been giving me a little bit of trouble because the ability always hits and it increases damage. I didn't know exactly how to do it. Oh, and it grants benefits to your defense as well. So I didn't really know how to do it. So what I've done is I said kind of a mix of the D&D Barbarian's Rage and Reckless Attack. You can spend a bonus action to give yourself advantage on melee weapon attacks, but you can also attacks against you have disadvantage. So kind of like Reckless Attack, but kind of not. And Rage gives you resistance. So just kind of mashing it all together. It is a bonus action, so if you have other things that require your bonus action, you have to chew it up. The thing that's getting me a bit, I'm not sure about, is that if you combo that with Berserk, which gives you expertise with weapon attacks, that is a ton of damage that you're able to put down range. So I'll keep an eye on it. I don't have a Barbarian playing in the campaign right now, but I'll think about it, see if there's anything else. The Paladin's Concentration Aura wording has been decided. I pulled the trigger on this one as well. I had 2 different ones that I was deciding on, and I'm just going to go with this one. The Amazon has a couple different changes. Penetrate's effect is now a bonus action and grants expertise with weapons. The Diablo effect is just increases your attack rating, and this way, I originally had it as advantage, but I was like, yeah, I want to separate it out a bit more, so I'll go with expertise for now. It still has a number of charges, but whatever. Magic Arrow now fully works with Pierce. Pierce said that you had to deal piercing damage. Magic Arrow switches can switch piercing to force damage. So what I've done is just said, Magic Arrow, it's actually written into the ability that it works. It just works with Pierce. Pierce itself has been changed. It now allows you to choose which creatures are affected. Previously, it said, each creature beyond that first one makes a dexterity saving throw. Now it's each creature of your choice beyond the first creature. And then the Javelin subclass features can now be used with a thrown spear. So they work, it's literally just when you make a ranged attack with a spear or with a javelin or a spear. Just making it so that you have a bit more broader options. All right, let's get into the main event, the feedback points. So you'll see up here in the corner, 3.3 feedback points. This is a document that I have put into the files so that you can take a look at it and see all the different things that goes on into making an ability. And this would work for items, this works for class features, subclass features, feats, basic rules, basically everything that could go into a TTRPG. It's tuned for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, but I'm sure this will work for other editions, for other TTRPGs. Just, adapt for what it's worth. I have spent a ton of time on this, and I do not guarantee that everything is here. I have spent so much time on this, and I'm still not done. I'm still not happy with a handful of things. But keep in mind, I'm one person working on this. This document was basically written by me with some feedback from my players, and they have done a wonderful job. I'd occasionally talk to them after a session, and they'll give different feedback points. And thank you very much to them for helping me. Nor are these guaranteed to be properly placed. There is a handful that they could fit in certain things, and they could fit under certain things, or they could be their own section, or they could be a subsection, or whatever. Just, like I said, I'm one person. Cut me some slack. Okay, the first thing when you are working with an ability, or when you're making an ability or tweaking an ability, is what components or resources go into that ability. I've listed some common ones. Oh, that is a fair point here. These are not guaranteed to be everything. These are just the most common ones that I can think of. Anyway, back to the components and resources. First off, does it use an ability score? Ranged weapons, for example, they use dexterity. Melee weapons use strength. Now, there are certain properties, such as thrown and finesse, that can modify that. But if you're making an attack, what kind of ability score are you using? Are you a druid attacking with wisdom? Are you an artificer working with intelligence? Speaking of spells, verbal, somatic, and material, all three of those go into spells. Some require one, some require more. Verbal and somatic aren't necessarily... I don't think I've ever seen any variation of those. It just says verbal or somatic. But material sometimes requires specific materials, like a lightning-struck twig for lightning bolt, or jump requiring the hind leg of a grasshopper, I think. Some of them require coin costs, like the Summon Undead spell requires a gilded skull worth, I think, 500. It's either 300 or 500 gold pieces. Some of these specific materials are just... Does it require a weapon? Booming blade, okay, it technically requires a weapon of 1 silver piece or more, but smiting also requires a weapon, not just a weapon attack. So you can't smite on unarmed strikes. Does it require a specific type of weapon? Shillelagh, for example, only works with, I think, clubs and quarterstaves. Sometimes it's a requirement that you have an armor, such as the defense fighting style. As long as you're wearing armor, your armor class goes up by 1. Some require a specific type of armor. The heavy armor master says while you are wearing heavy armor, you reduce the damage from bludgeoning, piercing, slashing, I can't remember if it's magical or non-magical, by 3. But some specific materials can be excluded if you have an arcane focus. I think the restriction is if it requires a specific material that does not have a coin cost. So you wouldn't be able to use Summon Undead with an arcane focus, which makes me very sad. Does it require a mental component, such as concentration? Mantle of Majesty from the Bard, College of Eloquence Bard, requires your concentration. So you can't concentrate on a spell and use Mantle of Majesty. Some other mental components, things like, can you think? Some things require you to be able to focus on what you're doing. Another big component is time. Does it take, how much time does it take to actually use the ability? Is it passive, like proficiency in a skill? It doesn't take any time at all. Reckless attack, is it what I've called a non-action activate? You can choose when you take this specific action, you can choose to use it or not. It doesn't take up any, it doesn't take an action or whatnot. It's just that you can use it. Magic Mouth is a trigger. When somebody walks within 30 feet of it, it starts speaking. Some other time, some especially more common ones, are actions, bonus action, reactions. Those are usually the ones you're going to use in combat, but some abilities actually require you to, as an action, you can do this, and you can technically do it out of combat. Legendary actions are special. In between turns, you can just declare, this creature is going to take a legendary action. It's going to make an attack against you, or it's going to move up half its movement, or call down lightning, or whatever. And it's not an action or bonus action or a reaction. It's just, it can happen when, in between player turns. Sometimes these, mostly spells, but some abilities require 1 minute, 10 minutes, 1 hour, so many hours. The paladin preparing and casting spells specifically says you have to take X number of minutes per level of the spell. So if you're getting 5th level spells, you have to take 5 minutes per level of, you have to take 5 minutes for a 5th level spell to prepare it. So if you're a 20th level paladin and you prepare all 5th level spells, bad idea, don't do it, then it takes like almost 3.5 hours just to prepare your spell list. But if you're doing just 1st level spells, well, that's like 15 minutes, I think, is the maximum, 15 spells. But there's also some, especially some spells, they have the ritual tag. You can burn 10 minutes doing 10 additional minutes doing a ritual, but it doesn't take a spell slot. Speaking of time, when does it recharge? Does it have no recharge, like extra attack? When you take the attack action, you can attack X number of times. Is it only X number of times per turn? Vigilant Defender from the Cavalier Fighter says that each turn you can take a special reaction and get an opportunity attack on somebody. And it's really good. The Cavalier's amazing. But X number of times per round. Blessed Strikes from the Cleric, I think, when you hit with a weapon attack, it deals an additional 1d8 radiant damage, but you can only do that once per round. Breath weapons recharge on a roll of a 5 or a 6 or a 6 or a 3 through 6 or whatever. So sometimes you have to roll a die to do it. Does it require X number of short or long rests? Sometimes it's what I've put as XDY. That's 1d6, 2d8, whatever. Short or long rests. Divine Intervention is a flat rate. If you call on your god and they give you help, then it requires 7 long rests. Necrotic Husk, on the other hand, is I think 1d4 long rests. When you drop to 0 hit points, you can stand up with X number of hit points, but you roll a d4 and it takes that many long rests before you can use it again. And that's on the Cleric and the Undead Warlock, I believe. Sometimes it never recharges. Wish, for example, you have a 33% chance if you use it for anything other than copying an 8th level or lower spell, it could never recharge. You'd never be able to cast the spell again. Speaking of charges, does it have a charge? Sometimes you can use this 3 times per short rest, or 5 times per long rest, or proficiency per whatever. And burning a charge is a resource. Sometimes those resources are class or subclass resources. Spell slots are a ton of different classes' resources, but superiority dice are only for the Battlemaster Fighter. Sometimes there's unusual resources, like hit points. I couldn't find any spell or ability that's requiring you to use your hit points. I think there's like transfer wounds, but it's not actually like you spend hit points. It's just you're dealing damage to yourself. But the Lucky Feat gives you 3 dice, essentially 3 dice or 3 charges that you can use on a attack roll, ability check, or saving throw. But another unusual resource is movement. Standing up from prone requires half your movement, and it's actually required for some abilities, Charger, for example, but I think I'll get into that a little bit later. Some restrictions or conditions to use or obtain. Sometimes there are no conditions. If a creature just has blind sight, they have blind sight. Although technically you have to be conscious in order to use blind sight, but the Paladin specifically writes out that you have to be conscious in order to grant the effect of the aura. Some items require attunement. Sometimes you have to be wearing or wielding or not wearing something in order to get the benefit. Dual wielder, you have to be wielding 2 weapons, 1 in each hand. Unarmored defense says you can't be wearing armor. Sometimes you have to take a specific action to get the benefit. Oh, this one gave me so much trouble. When you hit with or make a melee or range weapon or spell attack. Oh boy, let's break this down. So sometimes, like with disarming attack from the Battlemaster Fighter, when you hit with a weapon attack, there's no restrictions on whether it's melee or ranged, you can force the creature to attempt to drop something that they're holding. Curving Shot is the fighters, or the Arcane Archer fighter's 7th level feature that says whenever you miss... Yep, I forgot about that. You can also miss. The Curving Shot says when you miss, you could use a bonus action to attempt to attack another creature within 30 feet. Sometimes there's other abilities that say, whenever you hit with, or whenever you make a spell attack, you can do this. Sometimes it's whenever you get hit or somebody misses you. Hellish Rebuke. It's a spell. When you hit, as a reaction, you can attempt to burn the creature. Riposte is another Battlemaster maneuver. When somebody misses you, you can burn a superiority die and attempt to hit them. Whenever you cast a spell, Quicken Spell says whenever you cast a spell with a casting time of 1 action, you can change the action to a bonus action. Sometimes it's whenever you take the blank action. The mobile feat says whenever you take the dash action, difficult terrain doesn't cost you extra movement. Sometimes it's whenever you fail or succeed, or someone else fails or succeeds, a save or an ability check. Indomitable works with failed saving throws. You can re-roll. You can re-roll the die, and that works, by the way, with death saving throws, just so you know. Bring back the Brute Fighter, please. Silvery Barbs says when somebody succeeds on a saving throw or an ability check, you can force them to re-roll, #free Silvery Barbs, and grant advantage to somebody else. Moving on, see other restrictions. These are some of the next few are some of the more niche ones, sort of. Fireball, for example, you have to be able to see the target. You have to see the ground or the area that you're targeting, which, by the way, can be in the air. So you can fireball a dragon if you need to. It just says a point you can see within range. Spare the Dying is you have to be able to touch the target. Sometimes it's required that the target can see or hear you. Vicious Mockery, they can hear you, or they have to hear you, but they don't necessarily have to understand you. That's a little further down. And if they have the Frightened condition, they have disadvantage on attack rolls, and I think it's just attack rolls, maybe ability checks, if you are within their line of sight. Sometimes, you can't take a spell unless it's on your spell list. That's pretty common for most spellcasters. I think there's a handful of abilities that allow you to choose from any spell list. The Ritual Caster feature from the Warlock, Pact of the Tome, and the Magical Secrets from the Bard allows you to choose from any spell list. But the Eldritch Knight requires specifically certain spells from certain schools of magic. Same thing with the... what is it called? The Arcane Trickster Rogue. They have to choose from very specific... it can be from any spell list. No, it's wizard. Anyway, but they have to be from a specific school of magic. Sometimes you have to move in order to get the benefits. The Charger feat, like I mentioned a little while ago, it requires specific movement. Sometimes in a straight line, sometimes it's just you move X number of feet. But that is a condition in order to use the Charger feat. You have to move, I think, 10 feet before you can get a benefit to, I think it's either charging or not. It's either attacking or shoving a creature. Speaking of shoving a creature, body size is a restriction. They can't be more than one size larger than you. Otherwise, it's just kind of you run into them and it does nothing. Race is also another common feature or restriction or condition. Racial feats can only be used by the people that are of that race. The Belt of Dwarven... Oh, sorry, not the Belt of Dwarvenkind. It's the... oh gosh, we just got this in a different campaign. The something thrower, I can't remember. It's this hammer that requires attunement by dwarves. Now, the Belt of Dwarvenkind allows you to attune to items that dwarves can only attune to. But it's a fairly common restriction for feats. Sometimes certain properties have to be met. Defensive Duelist, you have to be wielding a weapon that has the finesse property. Sometimes the restriction is on your ability score. If you're multiclassing, you have to have if you're multiclassing and using the restrictions, then you have to have a 13 in a specific score in order to gain another class. Keen Mind requires you to have observed the event or the thing. I think there's a spell that says that you have to have what is it called? It's not polymorph. It's shape change. The wizard spell. You can turn into basically anything with challenge rating less than yours, but you have to have seen the thing. I actually use this to, well, I'd say good effect, but it was literally the last turn of the boss. But I use this this spell at the end of a campaign to help fight against the boss. I turned into an adult, was it white or silver? I can't remember. Adult something dragon, and got the killing blow on the boss. I was very proud of that one. Sometimes it's under half hit points. The survivor feature and the brute fighters feature on the champion fighter regenerates hit points if you are under your half your hit point maximum, but have at least 1 hit point. Sometimes these creatures or these targets have to understand you. Suggestion. You give them a suggestion. If they don't understand you, they can't take the suggestion. This one frustrates me to no end. Grasp of Hadar allows you to drag a creature when you hit them with Eldritch Blast towards you, but it has to be on your turn and only once each turn. If somebody's running away, I want to hit them and drag them back into combat, or drag the spellcasters out of position. Oh, they're in the back line. Let's drag them to the front line so that the barbarians can jump on them. But I can only do that once each turn and only on my turn. Drives me absolutely crazy. Sometimes the ability only works on something that doesn't have a specific quality. The zombie's undead fortitude only works on something that only works on damage that isn't from a radiant or critical strike. All right, moving on. Duration. Duration is just how long does this thing last? Most spells, most abilities are instantaneous. They just happen. It's done. But sometimes it's until the start or the end of a specific event. Sometimes it's the start or end of a turn. Chill Touch, for example, does both. You target a creature, and if it's an undead, it can't regenerate hit points until the start of your next turn, but it has disadvantage on attack rolls against you, or until the end of your next turn. So if you have 2 zombies that are next to you, you go turn 1, Chill Touch that one, and then next turn you do Chill Touch on the other one, and then you move. They both have disadvantage on their opportunity attacks against you. It's really handy. But sometimes it's the start of your next turn, or the end of their next turn, or just the end of the current turn. You can't really have the start of the current turn. Whatever. Moving on. Now, I couldn't find anything that was the start of a short rest, but the tranquility feature from the Way of Long Death Monk specifically says the start of your next long rest. I'm very proud of finding that one, by the way. I can't remember what it does, but it's specifically the start of a long rest. But sometimes it's the start or the end of a day. Let's see. Certain items recharge at the start of a day, mostly specifically dawn. Not really the start of a day, but just work with me here. Some things last until they're dispelled, or until the creature saves, or until the thing is triggered, or until a specific action is taken. Arcane Lock lasts until dispelled. Hold Person, saved. Glyph of Warding, triggered, and Rhymes Binding Ice specifically says that they have to take an action to break the ice. And it lasts until those things happen. Some other things, 1 round, 1 minute, 10 minutes, 1 hour, so on and so forth. Certain things on here, these are specific spells: Move Earth, Dream of the Blue Veil, Contagion, and I'm going to let you Gaelic people pronounce that word right there. Right there. I'm not going to try. But those are the only spells that I could find that have that specific duration. Range. How far does this ability go? Sometimes, especially with spells, sometimes they have a range of self. It starts with you. Sometimes it's a range of touch that you can touch other creatures, like invisibility or shocking grasp. Now, keep in mind, some of these ranges are actually, as I'll get into later, the size of an area of effect. But yeah, 1 foot, 5 foot, some multiple of 30 feet, 100 feet, 500 feet, 1 mile, 500 miles, project image. Sometimes it's range of sight. Galdur's Speedy Courier can only contact people that are on the same plane. But Sending, on the other hand, can contact somebody anywhere on any plane, but there is a 5% chance that the message is not received. Anyway, but sometimes you can have a range with an additional area of effect. Cone of Cold, for example, has a range of self, but it has a 30-foot, 15-foot cone of, well, cold. But if it is an area of effect, what shape is it? Is it a circle, a cone, a cube, a cylinder, a line, a sphere, or a square? I couldn't think of anything else that has any other shapes. I mean, if anybody wants to pull out something that has an octagonal shape, go for it. But I couldn't find any. And of course, how big, what is the size of the area of effect? Is it 30 feet radius? Is it a 15-foot line? Is it a 20 by 20 by 20 foot square? That is a cube. Anyway, but yeah, what is the shape and the size of the area of effect? Delivery. How does the ability or item or whatever effect get to its affected creature, object, or place? Is it personal? Is it like blind sight? Like I said before, is it just something that you yourself has? Is it an attack? Is it a saving throw? If it is a saving throw, what ability score is targeted? Is it a Constitution saving throw? Or is it a Dexterity saving throw? And what happens on a success or a failure? Do they succeed and don't take any damage? Or do they fail and get knocked prone? Do they take half damage on a success? Or heck, there's the acid something or other. It's the quote-unquote acid fireball from Xanathar's Guide to Everything, I think, that on a failure, they take like 10d4 acid damage and then 5d4 acid damage at the end of their next turn or something like that. But if they succeed, they take the initial damage but not the secondary damage. So you can play around with it as much as you'd like. Is it an ability check? Do they have to make an athletics check to escape from a knot that you've tied? Speaking of which, Xanathar's Guide to Everything gave us some guides to making modified ability checks. Tying a rope is an intelligence-based sleight of hand, when normally sleight of hand is dexterity, and it sets the DC equal to whatever check you rolled, or whatever you rolled to make the check. Some of the most common ones would be something like a strength-based intimidation or strength-based... I mean, heck, if you were trying to blend in with a bodybuilding contest, you could make a strength-based deception check. Or if you're trying to persuade someone with a logical argument, it could be intelligence-based persuasion. There's a ton of really, really cool things that you could do with this. But who or what or where are you targeting? Is it your choice? Do you choose a creature? Or is it each creature? Pass Without Trace says each creature of your choice, but Sleep just says each creature is affected. Fireball is each creature is affected. Is it a flat amount? Is it, for example, going back to invisibility, I touch a creature. That is my choice, but it is one creature. But if I upcast it, I can choose up to a certain number of creatures to affect. Or something like Magic Missile or Scorching Ray is you fire so many rays or bolts at something and you get to divide it up as you choose. So you can hit one target or you can hit 3 different targets. It's up to you. But what are the other effects that could happen? Finally getting to what this ability does. Now, that being said, this is not an exhaustive list. This is just the best that I could get with what I can think of in the week week and a half that I've had. The most common effect is just damage, but I've roped in healing and temporary hit points in here because all of those are basically the same thing. It's just you're dealing negative damage. Granted, healing doesn't have a damage type, but yeah, okay, what damage type does it deal? Does it deal fire damage, force damage, slashing damage, piercing damage? I mean, Ice Knife, for example, deals both piercing damage and cold damage. It's really cool. Does it deal half on a save, or does it deal all or nothing? And is the damage magical or non-magical? Does it have the adamantine or silvered properties? I think those are more on the weapons themselves, but it's something to consider. Does the effect inflict or remove conditions? Lesser restoration gets rid of certain conditions. Knocking someone prone inflicts the prone condition. Sometimes the effect modifies variables, as we'll get down to in the scaling section later. Sometimes those variables get modified. Granting advantage or disadvantage is technically modifying a variable on whether or not you take the higher or lower roll on a die. Speaking of rolling dice, re-rolling or an additional roll. Elven Accuracy gives you the ability to re-roll a die when you make an attack roll using specific abilities. Savage Attacker is slightly different. You get to roll your damage dice twice, and you get to pick. I mean, they're very similar, but I decided they're different enough. I'm just gonna, here's the very thin line, and I'm gonna delineate the two. Does the effect increase or decrease resource? Longstrider gives you an additional 10 feet of movement. Slow reduces your movement by half. Being able to stand up from prone takes 20 feet of movement, but now you have 20 feet to run, whereas before you would only have had 15 if you're under the effects of Longstrider. Does it increase your max ability score? Primal Champion, the Barbarian's 20th level feature, increases your max ability score by 4 and increases your strength and constitution by that much. I considered throwing this under changes calculation. Again, thin lines here. But Mage Armor, for example, as long as you're not wearing armor, your armor calculation is 13 plus your dexterity. And that does override unarmored defense. That does override, I think, the Dragon Scales feat for Dragonborn. I think it's basically the same thing, but, here's a calculation, and you can only use one calculation for your armor class. The Silver Tongue feature of the College of Eloquence says that your rolls, your persuasion and deception rolls, can't be less than 10. So if you don't have proficiency in deception and you roll a 1 on deception, it doesn't matter. I now have a 10 on that roll. Sometimes the effect just increases or decreases your maximum hit points. Hero's Feast, Mummy Rot. Both do basically the same thing, just reversed. Are they positive or negative? Does the effect convert a resource? Font of Magic is very, very nice for this one. You can burn sorcery points to make spell slots, and you can burn spell slots to make sorcery points. The Rogue's Cunning action allows you to take the dash, disengage, or hide action as a bonus action. And it's kind of converting a resource. Sometimes the effect allows you to exchange something on a rest or when you are leveling. Preparing spells, for example, let's just swap out my spell list. Certain classes are prepared spellcasters. The Cleric, I think the Druid, and the Paladin all get to choose their spells whenever they finish a long rest. Exchanging Warlock Pacts. When you get to a level that allows you to get an ability score increase, you can swap out which pact you have. You don't like the Pact of the Chain that you have? We'll swap it out for Pact of the Talisman, or Pact of the Blade, or Pact of the Pact of the Chain. Sometimes properties are changed. Transmuted Spell says anything that's on this specific spell list, you can burn a sorcery point, or not spell list, damage type list, you can burn a sorcery point, and you can swap something to another one on that list. I threw increasing range on here. Eldritch Spear is an ability, an invocation, that bumps your Eldritch Blast from 120 feet out to 300 feet. It's ridiculously good. Also, get it with Sharpshooter, and now you have a 600-foot Eldritch Blast. Get distance spell from the sorcerer, and now it's at 1,200 feet. I love it. Sometimes that changing property is cost reduction or ignoring properties altogether. Athlete allows you to stand up with only 5 feet of movement. That's a cost reduction of half your movement to just 5 feet. Sharpshooter just flat out ignores cover, except for, full cover. And one of my players has been using that to great advantage. Yeah, he has. Anyway, sometimes these effects summon or remove things from the battlefield. Conjure animals, summon undead, conjure fae, or banishment. You want to get somebody off the battlefield, kick them into the next dimension. You want a creature to ride on, there's your summon steed. Sometimes these effects are instant death. Massive damage. Someone drops a building on you. I don't care if you're a barbarian. You're getting a house dropped on you. You're dead. Maybe. But if you're a wizard, you're dead. Like there's no question. And sometimes these effects are modified by other conditions. Sometimes these effects are negated by a certain property, such as being immune to a condition. If they're immune to being knocked prone, you can't knock them prone. If they're immune to frightened, good luck on using fear. And, these effects are many. There's a ton of them, and there's a ton more. And this is really the one that is the broadest. You can put basically anything you want into this effects category. But I just got the most common ones. I'm sure there's many, many more that I'm completely forgetting. I just don't have time or resources to go through every single thing and map out every single thing. But now we get to our final section, scaling. These are the variables. Anytime you have a number, this is where it goes. Is it once per long rest? Is it twice per long rest? Is it 3 times per day? Is it whatever? This is, does it deal additional damage? Does it reduce the damage? All of that goes under scaling. And the first one is the ability positive or is it negative? Is it adding something or is it subtracting something? Great Weapon Master hits both of those. You can take a -5 penalty to your attack roll, but if it hits, it deals an additional 10 damage. Sharpshooter as well is basically the same thing. But something like Mind Sliver, when it hits, when they fail the save against it, they reduce their next saving throw by 1d4. Bardic Inspiration can add an additional die to an ability check. And so you're able to manipulate things, whether it's pushing things up, pushing things down. Advantage, disadvantage goes here as well. Is it a flat amount? Is it a flat number? Like I said, is it just once per long rest or 3 times per long rest? The human ability score increase for the race is just the base human, by the way, is just a +1 to all of your ability scores. It's you're not adding 1d4. It's just 1. But there are certain variables. The most common one are dice. How many dice are you adding, and what is the step of the dice that you're using? If you want to have a maximum of 12 damage, you can deal 1d12 or 2d6 or 3d4. But those all change depending on which one you're doing, because 1d12 has an equal likelihood of 12 as it does with 1. But with the other 2, you literally can't get 1 because you are rolling 2 dice with a minimum of 2 or a minimum of 3. So there's different ways to deal X amount of damage or heal X amount. And dice is a very good way to do that. Sometimes the variable is based on your ability modifier. Bardic Inspiration is charisma modifier per long rest, and later on per short rest. But your ability modifier is technically a variable because it does change. Your proficiency is also another variable, and it levels up as you go. Emboldening Bond with the Peace Cleric can be used proficiency times per long rest. Sometimes your level in a class determines the number of resources that you have. Key points or sorcery points is determined by the number of levels you have in that class. But sometimes, like proficiency, it's just your overall level, and it scales as you get better with whatever you're doing. But some variables are dependent on how much resource you put into the effect. Focused aim with the monk, I believe it is an optional feature. It changes, it adds, you can burn 1 through 3 key points on a missed attack and get a +2 per key point to the attack, potentially turning it into a miss. Spell slots, if you want to upcast a spell, that is not exactly an amount of resource, but I think something like the, the Abjuration Wizard's Ward, I think, and the Clockwork Soul's Bastion of Order, I think, features also scale with the amount of resource that you put into it. But moving on to multipliers, there's actually quite a few multipliers. There's 0. Immunity. If you're immune to damage, you multiply all damage you take by 0. There are some fractions, such as resistance. It's multiplied by 1/2. And sometimes you have to round up, sometimes you round down. Vulnerability is multiplied by 2. It's double damage. And I'm sure there's 1 or 2 other ones in there multiplied by, I think it's like 5 times something. Like you can dash, when you take the dash action, your movement is increased by 5 times your proficiency or something like that. But there's also functionally unlimited. There was a discussion about whether this actually belongs under multiplier, but multiply by infinity. You can take unlimited amounts of dodging. Like that's not a resource. Like you can just do it as long as you are conscious, I guess. But it's functionally unlimited. But sometimes the ability, the scaling, is cut off at a maximum or has a floor of a minimum. Unerring Eye with the Inquisitive Rogue, I think, they can do an ability a number of times equal to their Wisdom modifier with a minimum of once. But Divine Smite is a maximum of 5d8 additional damage, not counting whether they're a fiend or an undead. But that means that even if you burn a 9th level spell slot, you're only dealing a maximum of 5d8, which makes me very upset because I wanted to build a Tensor's Transformation War Wizard that could smite. I just wanted to be able to smite with a 9th level spell slot, and it doesn't work. Ugh. Anyway, sometimes this scaling is based off of things that are not really a variable or a multiplier or whatever. Sometimes it's written into a graph. Your martial arts die gets better as you level up, but it only hits those benefits when you get to that level. It's not, proficient. It's not based off of your proficiency. It's not really a flat amount. Something like technically spell slots as well. How high up you go is based off of your level, sure, but the number of spell slots you get is a flat amount determined by your level on that graph. And that's pretty much it. There was that I was kind of trying to figure out where to put it. Legendary resistance, whenever the creature fails a saving throw, they can just choose to succeed instead. It kind of fits with the ignoring property or negated by property. Sometimes it's like it can't be less than X, but I didn't really know where to put it, but it's something to think of. But anyway, that's it. That's pretty much it. So the entire reason for this is there are different things that you can tweak. These are different knobs or dials that you can adjust to make something more powerful or not, or less powerful. Sometimes changing something from an action to a bonus action is beneficial. Sometimes changing it from an action to a bonus action is detrimental. If you have bonus actions that you want to use, like I had a character, Aaron Moonlight, who I desperately wanted to pick up a couple levels of Barbarian for raging, but he was also a long tooth shifter, and shifting from the race was also a bonus action, but so was rage. So, sometimes I wouldn't be able to use an action to rage and then use a bonus action to shapeshift. And those things really didn't work well together. But sometimes it makes it really, really good. At the start of the video, at the changelog, I said that the Barbarian's Concentrate is now a bonus action. Well, the Barbarian doesn't have a lot of bonus actions that they're using, so giving them an ability that they can use as a bonus action is actually really, really good for them, because it's allowing them to use an additional resource. But sometimes, like rogues, moving it from an action to a bonus action, being able to dash, that means that you can move and then dash as an action, then dash as a bonus action. Step of the Wind with monks as well, that they can just get out of there. I mean, you're not catching a monk. If they want to be gone, they are gone. And sometimes things like moving the dice step. I was modifying some the potions that I mentioned, that these cat creatures, the saber cats on the Diablo campaign. I had 2d6 and 2d4 of whether it's fire or poison. They were originally both 2d6, but I wanted to differentiate them. So the fire deals 2d6, but it's an all or nothing. But the poison is 2d4, less damage, but it still deals half damage on a success. So there's something you can tweak. Now, with all of these abilities in this Diablo 2, well, the Diablo adaptation that I'm making, if you want to figure out, how can I tweak something, I'm going to leave this file up so that it's a reference. If you're coming in, you're brand new, and if you're experienced with this, having something like this laid out to show you, here's examples of all the different things you can tweak. You want to take a look at it and go over it? Go for it. Like, this is here for your use. This was a ton of fun for me. This was just a project. This was a project for me because I love doing stuff like this. And having this here for people to look at is it's just so nice. It makes me feel warm and fuzzy inside, because people are going to look at this and say, oh, I can, here's what I can tweak. Anyway, I've been talking for quite some time, and now I've got to get to editing. I think I will end it there. You can contact me at XenosFan2, that is XENOZFAN2, on Twitter and Reddit, and you can contact the channel at Diablo2DND, that is Diablo2DND, on YouTube, and I look forward to hearing your feedback. And I think I will end it there. Thank you much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Have a good whatever.